Hello and welcome to part 2 of Why Capitalism Sucks. If you missed part 1, there's a link in the description. Otherwise, let's get on with the show. This is Bob. Bob makes bicycles. It's hard work putting together bicycles by hand in a dusty garage, but Bob loves the work. He loves making high-quality products and selling them to folks in his community at a reasonable price. It takes about 5 hours for Bob to make a bicycle, and he sells each bicycle for $100. Of course, Bob has to pay for parts and materials to put them together, and that comes to about $50 per bike. So at the end of the day, Bob makes about $10 per hour building bikes. But why do Bob's...
That doesn't sound like a living wage to me. Someone come in and force everyone to pay more for Bob's bike so he can make a living wage.
Neighbors pay $100 for a bike. They could, after all, just buy $50 worth of parts and put them together for themselves. The thing is, Bob's neighbors don't want to put together bicycles themselves. For Bob's neighbors, it's worth paying an extra $50 to not have to do all the work of putting together a bicycle.
Oh, congratulations, you discovered the division of labor.
Work that Bob puts into building a bicycle is called labor value. The concept of labor value was developed by Adam Smith, you know, the invisible hand of the free market guy. He explained labor value like this.
The real price of everything that everything really costs to the man who wants to acquire it is the toil and trouble of acquiring it.
In other words, according to Adam Smith, Bob's customers pay an extra $50 because they don't want to perform the labor of building the bicycle themselves. Over time, Bob earns a reputation as a really good bike builder. He gets so many orders that he can't possibly keep up with the demand by himself. So, being the entrepreneur that he is, Bob decides to hire his first employee. Bob manages to find a skilled bicycle mechanic named Kate who can also build a bike in 5 hours, the same amount of time as Bob. Now, Bob's company can build twice as many bikes in the same amount of time, which means he can pull in twice as much money. But Bob doesn't pay Kate $10 per hour, he pays her $5 per hour, $25 per bike, and pockets the other $25 for himself. Remember, Kate's labor value is exactly equal to Bob's. They both build the same bike in the same amount of time. Bob's customers don't...
What you're neglecting here is Bob's entrepreneurial spirit and the risk involved, and the fact that he's already built up a brand, a reputation that people want to do business with. Now, Kate only making $5 an hour, what's stopping her from getting her own garage and building the same bike, giving herself a raise to $8 an hour, and at the same time undercutting Bob's prices and beating him on the free market and selling bikes at a cheaper cost at the same time making more money? Why doesn't Kate just start her own business and compete with Bob?
Care if Bob or Kate made the bicycle, since both bicycles are exactly the same, so Bob is only paying Kate half of the value of her labor.
Again, what's stopping Kate from making more money on her own? Either getting paid at another job, finding a skill that pays more, or just starting her own business, which I just outlined you can make profitable while undercutting Bob price-wise on the free market.
The rest of the money, the $25 that Bob pockets for himself, is called profit. Bob really likes profit because it means he's making more money per hour for the same amount of work. Kate turns out to be a really great employee. She even comes up with some ideas for improving the workflow so that a bicycle can be built in half the time without sacrificing any quality. Customers are still willing to pay $100 for each bicycle, but now Bob only has to pay Kate $12.50 per bicycle instead of $25.
Oh, well, it sounds like she got a raise. Sounds like everything's going good. Kate's just doubled her income. What's the problem?
He's essentially doubled the profit he makes on Kate's work per hour.
And Kate over doubled her income. What more do you want?
By now, Bob is pretty busy with marketing the business and meeting with customers, so he hires some more workers to work with Kate. He even gives Kate a raise, paying her $10 per hour to manage 5 workers who each make $5.
Oh, so she wasn't making $12.50 an hour before? Did I miss something? Well, okay, now she just doubled her income. Sounds like everything's going good for Kate.
Per hour because of it.
And she also doesn't have the risk and responsibility of owning a garage and maintaining a business, maintaining a brand, getting dealing with patent offices. I mean, do they have patents on those bikes?
As employees, Bob's company is able to build bicycles 10 times faster than he was able to do on his own. Bob used to make $10 per hour building bicycles on his own, but now he's making $65 for every hour that the factory's operating. Now, Bob is pulling in a lot of profit. He invests a lot of this money back into the business. He rents out a bigger factory space and hires even more employees. He hires a staff to manage the business for him so he can spend more time jet skiing in Malibu. And the staff make the business even more efficient and manage to sell even more bicycles. And of course,
sounds like Bob's making everyone a lot richer. It's making everyone a lot richer. That Bob seems to be doing pretty good, if you ask me. And he's enjoying life by riding jet skis. Man, Bob, people should be more like Bob.
First, Bob is taking his cut of profits from each new worker. Bob is
and these people would not have jobs without Bob.
Accumulating wealth faster and faster, and life is looking pretty great. But, uh-oh, what's this? A big new bicycle factory has opened up in town, and they have a lot of big fancy machines that produce bikes twice as fast as Bob's little factory. Things are looking pretty bad for Bob and his employees. These fancy new competitors are selling bicycles for half the price of Bob's bikes, and sales plummet. Bob has to come back to town from Malibu for an emergency meeting. His staff gives him some pretty bad news. They're going to have to cut costs, and the only cost they can really cut significantly is labor. So Bob does what he has to do. He lays off half of his workers. To pick up the slack, Bob takes on some investors to buy some fancy new factory machinery. Fortunately,
So he took on some investors, which means he either had to sell his company or borrow money, which again is risky. Risks that his employees don't have to take.
Plan succeeds. Bob is able to lower the prices of his bicycles, sales climb back up, and the crisis is averted.
So now the cost of bicycles have gone in half, and it looks like capitalism has resulted in the cost of living at least decreasing by half, while there's more opportunities for everyone. Of course, now that bikes are being more automated, now people have more time to focus on maybe inventing new things, better technologies.
In fact, things go so well that Bob and his investors start looking for more ways to cut costs and increase revenues. Bob and his new partners quickly realize that they can cut their costs tremendously if they shut down the factory in America and export production to China. Now all of Bob's American factory workers are out of a job. Sorry, Kate. But now Bob is making more money than ever because he only has to pay his Chinese factory workers a fraction of what he paid his workers in America, which nets him even more profit per bicycle. Never mind that the factory workers in China are suffering, working 15 hours per day and barely...
And working those factories is still a huge step up over communism. Yeah, all these factories, it's funny. China had, they're still under Communist Party rule, but they tried communism really hard for 40 years. And then the Communist Party pragmatically started allowing greedy corporations into China to build factories. And these capitalists, these corporations, these factory owners that build these factories, they said, hey, people of China, do you want to come in and work in our factories long hours for little pay as compared to American workers? And they said, yeah, that sounds good. Sure beats living under communism.
Able to survive on their crummy wages, Bob is making hand over fist. But, oh, poor Kate. From the very beginning, Bob only paid her half of the value of her labor. She would have started her own bicycle factory, of course, but she just didn't have enough money to buy all the tools and equipment she needed, and she had a child to feed. She worked hard and hoped Bob would reward her for her good ideas. And when all was said and done, Bob fired Kate as...
How many people come into Shark Tank and they have kids and they're working full-time jobs and they're still starting new businesses and being entrepreneurial? God, this example is so not tied to anything in reality and so dishonest.
As soon as he realized he could make more money moving his operation to China. This is the nature of capitalism. At every step of Bob's...
The nature of capitalism.
journey, he has stolen labor value from his employees and sacrificed their well-being to boost his own profits. Bob isn't necessarily a bad guy. He liked his employees. He felt terrible about having to fire Kate. He didn't want to lay anyone off, but Bob's competition forced him to cut costs wherever he could, and that means driving down wages. Of course, Bob could have cut down his own profits, but he's just not willing to make that sacrifice. See, as the owner...
Yeah, why should anyone be willing to make any sacrifice?
...of the means of production, Bob is a capitalist, and that puts him in a different class than the workers he hired. Being in a
Again, this whole this whole notion of classes is fucking stupid.
Different class, Bob has different class interests than his employees.
Class interests.
A worker's class interests will always drive them to seek higher wages. Every worker wants
Of course, Bob started this video as being part of a working class. He wasn't that rich, and he built his company from the ground up
to try to earn as much of the value of their labor as they can. Meanwhile, capitalist class interests are to seek higher profits, and that means keeping wages as low as they can get away with. Bob didn't realize it, but these opposing interests mean that he was engaged in class warfare with his employees. Every decision Bob makes...
The only people who are engaging in class warfares are communist scum that make this video.
...must drive him to increase profits, which means he needs to drive down costs, which will hurt employees, or drive up prices, which will hurt his customers and help his competition. Bob and all the other
See, Bob was just trying to start a business and make money and pursue his happiness, and it's communists like NonCompete who push this notion of class warfare and want to start one. That's what Marxism is.
In the world have to.
It's called a class warfare. You just want to define people by arbitrary classes, and then once you do that, then you go to war.
Act according to these principles.
Meanwhile, Bob was just producing bicycles, employing people, driving down the cost of bicycles, making it easier for poor people to afford bicycles, because now the cost of buying a bike is now half of that. He's taking on risk, and it paid off. And he's living a good life by taking nice vacations and jet skiing on water. Good for Bob.
If they don't, other capitalists who are more ruthless and aggressive will drive them out of business. Under capitalism, all of human labor is harnessed to one force.
Also, the purpose of going into business is not to drive out your competition. The purpose of going into business is to be productive and pursue happiness and turn profits. As I said on a previous video, there are plenty of industries where there are numerous competitors that don't have to drive their competition out of business, and they still make lots and lots and lots of money. Steve Jobs said this at an event with Apple. He said, Apple winning doesn't mean Microsoft has to lose. There was a story about Pepsi-Cola. Someone stole the recipe for Coca-Cola and gave it to Pepsi. First thing Pepsi-Cola did was they called Coca-Cola and they called the FBI and they said, this is not how we do business. So yeah, being in business and turning profits does not mean you have to bankrupt your competition.
The profits of capitalists. Nothing gets made and nothing gets done unless it benefits the capitalist class that rules over the working class.
And you also have to benefit your customers, or they're not going to buy your fucking products.
That's just the nature of capitalism. If you're a worker...
The nature of capitalism? God, what a determinist moron.
Then you are a victim of capitalism just like Kate. The capitalists who own the company you
I would rather be a victim of capitalism than be a victim of communism.
Work for are stealing the value of your labor and exploiting you. No matter how much they try to convince you otherwise, they really don't care about you. They can't if they want to keep lifting their profits. As soon as they figure out a way to make more money without you, you'll get cut out. You are engaged in class warfare whether you recognize it or not, and if you take the side of the capitalists, you are betraying your own interests as well as the interests of all your fellow workers. You may have noticed something. There are a lot more of us.
Again, no one has any allegiance to an arbitrary collective, especially economic classes.
Workers than there are capitalists, so why don't we all just refuse to play along with this little game? Why do we allow capitalists to steal our labor value? Well, there are
probably because they're making our lives better.
A lot of reasons. And
steal our labor value? Well, they're making our lives better. I think that's why most people put up with capitalism. Or at least elements of capitalism.
We'll get into some of them in the next video on why capitalism sucks, so click subscribe and stay tuned for part 3. In the meantime, you can check out my blog and more videos like...
Meanwhile, this guy is able to put his propaganda online thanks to greedy corporations like Google.